There are moments in life that don't arrive loudly. They don't warn you. They don't give you time to prepare. They simply appear, settle deep inside your chest, and refuse to leave. For me, that moment came the day I stood face to face with the man who took my brother away from this world, and spoke as if what he had done was reasonable. Before the story begins, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. I remember how still everything felt. The air itself seemed heavy, like it was waiting to hear the truth along with me. I wasn't angry in that moment. I wasn't screaming or crying the way people expect someone like me to do. I had already cried enough. What I needed then was an answer. Something that could explain how a human being decides that another life is disposable. So I asked him, "Why did you kill my brother? What had we ever done to you?" My voice didn't shake. It surprised even me. Maybe grief had already burned everything soft inside me, leaving only clarity behind. For a few seconds, he didn't answer. He avoided my eyes, as if the truth was something fragile that needed careful handling. Then he said it, slowly, calmly, like a confession he had rehearsed many times in his mind. "Because I loved you." The words felt unreal, like they didn't belong in the same sentence as my brother's death. Love was supposed to protect, not destroy. I waited for him to say more, something that might make it make sense, but instead he continued, his voice steady, almost proud. "I couldn't let you belong to anyone else. I couldn't let him stand between us." That was when I truly understood how dangerous obsession can be when it disguises itself as love. My brother had not been his rival. He had not been a threat. He had simply been part of my life. Someone who cared for me, protected me, and mattered to me. And in this man's mind, that alone was enough to justify murder. I asked him if he understood what he had done. If he understood that my brother had dreams, plans, a future that extended far beyond whatever fantasy he had created in his head. He listened, but he didn't hear me. People like him rarely do. They only hear themselves. He said something then that changed the way I looked at everything. "I did it so we could be together. And I would do it again if I had to." In that moment, fear finally reached me. But it wasn't fear of him. It was fear of what would happen if I stayed silent. I realized that this wasn't the end of his obsession. This was only the beginning. If he believed love gave him the right to take a life, then there would never be a limit to what he felt entitled to do. I didn't argue with him. I didn't threaten him. I walked away carrying two things: unbearable loss and an unshakable decision. If he thought love would protect him, he was wrong. If he thought my silence meant weakness, he was wrong. And if he believed I would let my brother's death be reduced to a twisted love story, he had underestimated me completely. That was the day I chose justice over fear. That was the day revenge stopped being emotional and became intentional. After that conversation, I didn't disappear from his life the way most people expected me to. I didn't block his number immediately, and I didn't confront him with anger. Instead, I did something far more dangerous for someone like him. I listened. I allowed him to speak, to explain himself, to reveal his thoughts in his own careless confidence. Men like him believe their emotions excuse their actions, and when they feel understood, they become reckless with the truth. Every word he spoke, every message he sent, every justification he offered became a thread in a larger pattern that I was quietly weaving together. He talked about destiny as if it were something he could control. He talked about love as if it were a claim, not a choice. He never once spoke my brother's name with regret. That absence told me more than any confession ever could. At night, when the world was quiet and grief tried to consume me, I wrote everything down. Dates, times, phrases, moods. I didn't trust memory alone, because memory bends under pain. I needed facts, solid, unchanging, undeniable. I began to understand that revenge doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it grows slowly, fed by patience and discipline. While he believed I was still confused, still broken, still unsure, I was becoming something else entirely. I was becoming precise. I researched laws I had never imagined I would need to understand. I learned how obsession is documented, how intent is proven, how patterns speak louder than single acts. Every step I took was careful, because one mistake could turn truth into doubt. Grief was still there, sitting quietly inside me, but it no longer controlled my actions. It sharpened them. Walking into the police station felt heavier than carrying my brother's coffin. This time, there was no ceremony, no family surrounding me, no shared mourning. It was just me, a chair, and the weight of truth pressing against my chest. I remember thinking that if I faltered even for a second, fear would win. And fear was exactly what he relied on. I spoke slowly, clearly, without drama. I told them about his words, his obsession, the way he framed violence as devotion. I handed over everything I had collected, not as accusations, but as facts. The officers listened differently once they saw the pattern. Once they realized this wasn't a crime of sudden emotion, but of long-term fixation and entitlement. When they brought him in for questioning, he was confident. Too confident. He smiled the way people do when they believe charm will save them. But confidence cracks under consistency, and I watched it happen piece by piece. When confronted with his own words, his own messages, his own recorded intentions, his story began to collapse. Later, when he realized I was the one who had reported him, his expression changed in a way I will never forget. It wasn't anger. It was disbelief. As if he truly believed I owed him my silence simply because he claimed to love me. That was the moment I knew I had already won the most important battle. The process was slow, painfully slow. Justice rarely moves at the speed of grief. There were hearings, evaluations, testimonies, and moments when exhaustion whispered that it would be easier to let go. But every time doubt tried to enter my mind, I remembered my brother's absence. I remembered that letting go would mean allowing his death to be rewritten as a tragic misunderstanding instead of what it truly was, a deliberate act born from obsession. He tried to shift blame. He tried to portray himself as emotional, misunderstood, driven by passion rather than intent. But the law doesn't listen to excuses when evidence speaks clearly. His own words betrayed him. His own behavior outlined the truth more accurately than any accusation I could have made. Sitting there, listening to professionals describe his mindset in calm, clinical terms, I felt something unexpected: relief. Not happiness. Not satisfaction. Relief that the truth no longer depended on my voice alone. It stood on its own now, solid and undeniable. Revenge, I learned, doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes it means exposure. Justice did not give me my brother back. No verdict ever could. Some losses are permanent, and learning to live with them is a quiet, lifelong process. But justice gave me something else, something just as important. It gave me safety. It gave me my autonomy. It gave me the knowledge that silence would not be mistaken for consent ever again. He once believed that love entitled him to control lives that weren't his. In the end, it was that belief that destroyed him. Not my anger. Not my pain. The truth. Now, when I think of my brother, I don't only remember the way he died. I remember that his life mattered enough to be defended fully, carefully, and without compromise. I remember that standing up did not make me cruel. It made me honest. And if there is one thing this journey taught me, it is this. Love that demands ownership is not love. It is a warning. And I listened.